thank you for joining 8760. With us, we have Becky Lewis, co-founder or founder of Invictus Records. So I guess tell the audience a little bit about Invictus to start, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, sounds good. So Invictus Records, it's really, it's a standard record label in terms of how we're setting it up from a business perspective. It's registered as a C Corp in the state of Massachusetts. I think the vision is really kind of what makes it pretty unique. The vision behind it is to really offer an alternative model to how a label could function in the music industry. And by doing that, it really means how do we kind of lift up artists, which are at the core of the industry, and allow them.
Seemingly the antithesis of what typical labels are
Correct.
known for, right?
Correct. And we see a lot more movement happening now in the industry, especially with streaming and with TikTok and everything happening. But by and large, artists still aren't able to make a living this way. So only 1 in 5 artists actually can make a living from music in general. And so out of everyone out there, singers, songwriters, everyone you see on TikTok, Instagram, most of those people are not going to be able to make a living doing that. So most of them have 2 to 3 jobs and then do this like in the evening as a side gig.
How did you get into music industry from, what was it, like a early passion, or are you, like what brought you there?
Yeah, so it's kind of an odd path. I actually have a really good friend that is under a major label now, and that has had pretty crazy experiences in the label. Everything from really kind of punitive power struggles to mental health challenges, and so just kind of seeing what this individual went through, and my background in kind of workforce and equity, I was like, there's got to be a better way. This just doesn't make sense. And even though like on paper, this person looks great, right? Like they're living the high life. But then if you talk to them, it's like, man, that life is not one that I would choose, right? The sacrifices are too great.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, and maybe this is still true, maybe it's not true, but they kind of like treat their talent as kind of like puppets and give them little stipends just enough to actually, and the few that really make significant money are very few and far between, but otherwise you're sort of a slave to the label.
Yeah, well, and if you think about the history, it used to be really high cost industry, right? To even just get an artist launched, because you had it was a very physical product industry. So it was records, it was CDs, right? All of these tangible things. And then over time, it's become less costly to lift somebody up. But initially that was part of the label function, right? Was to actually invest all this money. And then once they kind of recoup their money, then the artist would start earning money.
Yeah, sure.
And so some artists don't even start earning money until like 10 years in a label. And there's history over the years of like so many artists, like Tom Petty in the 70s, like declared bankruptcy, right? Just to get out of his label, just to get out. That was his only way out. And then if you look through like, more recent examples of that too. But yeah, it's a pretty powerful narrative. Like if you look at kind of over time of how this has progressed, and that artists really are kind of like a product versus treated as actual humans.
So what's your approach, or what's the angle that you're taking that is truly different, or is it just philosophically?
Yeah, so I can't give you our full secret sauce and don't do it.
Sure.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I think the overall model. So the way that most contracts work now, and even my friend signed a contract at 28. Didn't really read it, right? There's a lot of things in the contracts where it's basically the label owns you and owns, there's a couple things. So there's the masters, which is actually if you perform a song and there's a recording of that song, that's the masters. So most labels own the majority of an artist's masters. Even some own 100% for the first 5 or 10 years, and then some own 50% in perpetuity, so forever.
Right.
So the artist is only ever making a small amount over that. And so part of the idea is to really transform, the transparency and what the kinds of contracts and agreements that's happening, because most artists don't understand the contracts they're signing. And that's part of how it's functioned, right? There's been a power and an information imbalance. And so really what we're trying to address is create, contracts and partnerships with the artists. And so really look at it as a more mutual model where it's not top down, but it's really okay, let's build this partnership together and really empower the artists to really be equals, right? And to have ownership over their music. And that's a very different approach to the industry.
Well, it seems like recent headlines, I think it was Eber, maybe others, right, that have sold their masters rights, right, or their catalogs.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just because they are cash strapped, or like they went through sort of their initial lump, or do you see that as sort of like strategically driven? Like why would they do that? Why would they give up their whole portfolio?
I think there's a huge, and I'm still learning this, right? This is not my like bread and butter yet.
Yeah.
But there's all these different revenue pots, and even any label, even operating today, like the big ones, like Universal and Sony, like they have so many revenue streams. So there's merch, there's touring, there's the masters, which is the recordings, there's publishing, which is actually the lyrics. So there's separate royalty payments that go to artists and labels and all the middlemen for the publishing and the lyrics separately from the actual recordings.
Okay.
So it's a very complicated industry with lots of nuances. And again, I'm still learning some of this. There are separate costs attributed to a catalog. So the catalog is like, okay, these are your 5 songs that you've written that have gone viral, right, or have really had success. And so you can sell a portion of your catalog. Like there are private equity firms that buy portions.
I was going to ask you about that.
Catalog. So I read somewhere that like someone bought a portion of Kelly Clarkson's catalog, but not the whole thing, right? So she's still holding on to part of it. So some of that can be that if you're an artist, a lot of your assets, it's not cash in hand. So your assets and your worth are tied up in these things, and your masters and your catalog. And so if you need cash, yes.
Hey, you're trying to get an advance on
right?
Right.
You might want to sell a portion. Part of it could be that, I think there could be lots of reasons for that. But I think that certainly could be one option. I can't obviously speak to specific.
I did see that though, like the private equity companies and others like investing essentially as like long-term return annuities, like
Totally. Yeah. And they're going for like 16x some of the catalogs.
Well, I think it's, maybe if you're an artist that feels like you're not gonna have the Mariah Carey Christmas, single that gets her something like 20 million a year just in like All I Want for Christmas royalties, whatever that is, right? Like that you might as well try and capitalize on it now and let them worry about whether people still care about the song in a decade.
For sure. Yeah.
So from a artist type, genre type, kind of who are you looking to most partner with? What's sort of the ideal?
Yeah. So I think like in theory, we'd like to be genre agnostic. We do have some artists that are, we haven't signed anybody yet, but we're kind of in that process of slowly kind of starting to vet some talent. I think we will focus on a few country artists to start. There's an interesting, I think, trend though happening even in the industry where genre, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I think it matters less than it did 10 years ago. I have an artist in New York that I'm working with who really like comes from a background of like hip hop, and his wife loves country. And one day his wife was like, look, like you got to figure out a way to like blend these two because I'm sick of hearing your stuff, right? And so he came up with a song. It's not out yet, but a song that just does that, right? And so I think we see a lot of, for all these reasons, like I think we see a lot of that kind of melding where there is loyalty to specific genres. But even if you look at artists that are high profile, like some of them has started off as more country and then transitioned over time to be a little bit more poppy. And I think there's just less of a wall between now, which is a good thing.
There's a lot of crossover, Post Malone jumped to mind, but there's many out there that have gone very mainstream and kind of crossed back over. I guess that's not necessarily new, but it's definitely more common. The days of a Kid Rock singing with, what was it, Alanis Morissette or whatever, like some ballad is, those are fewer and far between, but so what's kind of the roadmap for you? Like what's timing look like, and do you have plans on big launch party kind of thing, or what's the hope?
I think I have a really strong team of people that are really dedicated to kind of the mission and the vision. We're kind of trying to build something from a brand perspective that's a little bit bigger, that even includes a few things beyond just music. And so we're kind of pulling that brand identity together. I think in the next few months, we'll do a larger kind of push out of that brand over social media. And then I would love to be able to do like some kind of physical event. And we've talked about doing something in Nashville. I have some people in Nashville. We talked about doing something in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is random, but huge singer-songwriter community. We have the Iron Horse.
I was going to ask you about like, because you're based in Massachusetts, and it's not necessarily known as the musical,
epicenter of the world.
Right.
No, but Northampton is like, it's weird. A lot of artists have actually come from, I don't know if you've heard of Dar Williams, but like she was from Northampton. She and the Iron Horse is kind of like a focal point of singer-songwriter history in the community. And they have there's actually a nonprofit group now that operates in that community and really hosts open mic nights for singer-songwriters. So it's interesting. It's not like a place where, you'd come up from New York City necessarily to go. But there's a very, robust and healthy community, and a lot of and in Western Mass in general, I would say, which is kind of interesting. So it's kind of like this little epicenter, in the random spot in Western Mass.
So when you're working with your team, like how are you collaborating? What do you kind of rely on from your background, from your, sort of skill set in prior life or, second life that, keeps team focused and motivated and the vision clear? How do you kind of manage that? So it seems like it's kind of diverse as far as footprint too, and you're not necessarily in the room day to day.
Totally. And I mean, right now my team is literally all over the country. So people in California, Nashville, Texas, Indiana, Massachusetts, so Florida. So really, really diverse, and really, mostly sweat equity right now. Right. And so I think the thing that I've really relied on from my background is really how do you align people around a vision? And then how do you find the right people when you don't know how to do something, right? So goodness knows the music industry is not the thing that I'm most familiar with. So I have found, all these remarkable humans that are willing to kind of educate me and connect me with somebody else who can then help me navigate a certain piece, or who are willing to even take on a piece themselves, right? If like, just because of it's such an interesting, it is a very segmented industry in a lot of ways. So there's people that do the publishing, there's people that do the producing, there's people that do the distribution, right? And those are very siloed. And so finding different people to help navigate that. And then really, I think we kind of are in this like rebrand phase. And so I would say, it's definitely been challenging at times to kind of keep morale, because I think anytime there's, something, you're not changing the mission, right? But you're kind of maybe adjusting the process or tweaking. Yeah. And I think regardless, as a human, change is hard. And so you just kind of have to like keep, does everyone want to still be doing this? And what can we do kind of make sure communication is as tight as possible, but also be okay with it. Like there may be some ambiguity here and there. Yeah. We have to kind of be able to write it out.
Well, because like when you're the one changing direction, you know that it may feel like we're taking a step backwards or, taking a detour, but it's still, there's still an end goal. Whereas those that are, sort of committing to the cause cannot necessarily connect those dots as easily.
But then sometimes too, as a leader, you have to step back and be like, wow, like all of this is in my head and I didn't communicate it as well as I could have, right? And so how do you make sure that you're bringing people along with you and not just kind of leaving them by the side as you, keep moving?
How have you kind of conditioned yourself or taught yourself or learned to do that? Like what goes into your prep to or your communication style to be able to convey that clearly?
I think it's always a work in progress. I mean, currently, like, I think a lot of it is just trial and error to some extent. I think, there's definitely folks on my team that communicate really differently. And so, and I just by nature am like a very empathetic person. So there's times where like I've taken things personally, right? And this was like, I didn't mean it personally. And I'm like, totally, but it is personal, right? How do you understand it? So I think sometimes like you just have to have it out in a respectful way, and then you keep learning the people, you keep trying to, understand yourself, understand like, oh, well, the fact that I didn't communicate this person could have experienced it as like being shut out, right? Even though that was my intention. And so I think just being open to that reflection and also acknowledging like, yeah, I messed up. Yeah. I think that's important. Not saying like you're in this ivory tower and you can do whatever you want. And then I also say like, I do have teenage daughters. And so I think Like I have certainly lots of flaws, but I have to work on myself constantly because of that. And so I think that helps me
Mm.
because I'm constantly having to work on self-regulation, not losing my mind, right? Like just saying
My
like
2 and 4-year-old don't help me necessarily yet, other than maybe helping my patients.
well but it's the same thing. I mean, I've
Mhm.
had to, right, but like it's a different level of like when someone else is spiraling, like you have to
Yeah.
contain and
Mhm.
then learn how to kind of pause, reflect, and then move on. And it's different when they're 2 and 4. They're not quite taking in everything that you're doing in the same way. Whereas when they're 12 and 13, they're like, oh, well, you tell me to do this, but you don't do it. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's very fair point. So I think all of that like just gives me good practice too.
Mhm.
Um,
Have you thought about what not a end goal, but it's sort of a checkpoint of success looks like, or you feel like, okay, we accomplished this, and is it a certain number of artists signed? Is it a certain level of artists and activation, or a tour that you've enabled? Have you kind of thought through what that could look like?
yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's so hard because especially being new to this space, like the biggest challenge for me or obstacle feels like, okay, we have to like get investors. Like that's like the biggest thing. And
Hmm.
it's not. And actually one of the mistakes that I made early on was actually talking to investors and pitching too little.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, this chick doesn't know what she's talking about. Right. And I'm like, oh, you're actually right. I get that now. Like initially,
Mhm.
like you have to kind of see that. And so I think it's hard to separate like for me right now that like, oh, we need money to do all these things. And yes, I can see this end goal of like, I'd like to have, I mean, there's no shortage of artists who
Right.
believe in this, who want to come on board. I mean, I'm talking to them every day, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, when are you going to start signing people? I think,
So you probably have creators lined up too, right? To a certain extent, no?
yeah, yeah. I think if we can, I think it's really being able to build the model, and the model is multifaceted. It's ultimately not going to be just a label.
Hmm.
It's going to be a label plus.
Yeah.
Things that actually help lift up artists and help them succeed, particularly now in a digital age and where there are, on one hand, like music is more accessible than ever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you look at streaming artists of that, we're making like portions of a cent for every stream.
Hmm.
And so I think if we can actually build that model and then be able to show through the artist, self explained, proclaimed experiences, right? That
Hmm.
that they are able to be part of, this entity, this effort. And it's a label and that it's helping them have a career as a musician, but it's also kind of again showing that there is another way to do it.
Yeah.
And then the kind of, I'm not saying, the current model isn't going to go away, but there is another way. And so I
Well,
think that's what I'm hoping.
it's like as you were kind of going through that, like it was, I was kind of going and thinking that to a certain extent, like the as labels as from the traditional sense and talent agencies lines blur more and more, and there are these really shiny objects when it comes to creators and influencers that now that need representation, and then on the other side, the NIL and the athlete focus. It seems almost like the core musician and music industry is almost like a forgotten part right now, or and that seems like an
Interesting.
opportunity for you, right, to kind of come in and say we're doing it differently, and for right now at least, right, like
Mm.
we are focused on you musical talent, right, and the music industry, not just trying to make the grab for whoever's gonna spike in streams or views, right?
Right.
Um, so that's I mean that's definitely an interesting place. What's your because you have to balance it, right? Not to be all about you have to drive ROI and you want to be able
Mhm.
to kind of sustain the team, make great money. Um, and you can be transparent with the artists about how that relationship would go. How have you tweaked that pitch to investors who are probably just going to be about, when do I get my money
Yeah.
and interest out?
So I will say a few of my coworkers, like, this is one of those things where with my background, like hired a nonprofit, I would be more open than my coworkers are like, you need to say less right now because we're still building it. So, but I think the basic reality is that in the current industry, there's no transparency. Like, just to be clear, like people sign contracts without understanding the language, without having legal representation, without there is so much, power imbalance, communication imbalance, and really there is not transparency. I think we have artists who have been able to be successful. I have an artist who found a way to get 17 million streams on his own. That still only translates to like 60K a year. So still not necessarily like fully sustainable, better than like most people that are making like $1,000 a year. But I think the transparency actually, even though it seems like a small piece, is actually the biggest piece. Because from all the artists that I talk to, nobody understands how this industry works. And many artists don't want to be involved in the business side. They want to push their art. They want to be the producers of that art. They want the business, someone else to handle it. But that's kind of where we got to where we are now, right? Where then historically the labels have handled that function, but then at the expense of artists.
Yeah, or you see like at least the public spats between artists and labels could ultimately kind of come out as like they're trying to make me or restrict my creative, or who I am or who I've evolved into, and want me to make a record like this, right? Or I'm committed to however many records will form out of this, and it's almost, if there's maybe this could be sort of a interesting study, right? Is the longevity and sort of happiness of artists that are able to truly explore, right, and not be as handcuffed. And do they stay in the business longer? Do they make more resonant music because they're not sort of just selling out their feelings or whatnot? It could be a interesting angle to explore.
Yeah, definitely. And in general, like there is a high level of mental health, poor mental health among artists, particularly because of some of the financial stress, the creativity, and then just I think that sense of like it's just that broader control, right? That kind of there's a lot, they don't own their stuff. So in order for if I'm a label and I'm going to give you, say I'm going to invest like $300,000 in you till you get your career going, and then you start bringing me money in, until you earn that and more back, like you're not getting paid. Generally.
Right.
So I think that kind of a controlling relationship is really challenging, especially for someone who, tends to like artists are like free thinking and free flowing, right? So I think, I just think there's like that like dynamic is counterintuitive. And so that's also part of what would be shifted in kind of a different balance that we're proposing, because inherently in the design, you'd be essentially empowering people to keep that, right? They keep a certain amount of control. And so then they're not kind of like signing their lives away.
And then the public sees it as like, oh, that person didn't get a chance to grow up because they were on tour, or or it was drugs, or it was this, or it was that, or it's like in reality, you don't have control over your life, and you're being told what to do every single minute, and it's tough to stay sane that way.
I think that is 100% true.
You were talking about the royalties. Our chief creative officer and COO wrote a book years ago, and he told me the other day, he's like, I got my check from Amazon this month. It was 17 cents. So it's like, I was like, nice. I was like, is that standard? He's like, nah, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 35. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is like, I wrote a book a super long time ago, and like, used to get royalties from them. They stopped because they stopped. But like, I mean, it's nice to get a check, right? But it's like, it has to be like meaty for it to be meaningful, right? And so if it's like 17 cents, great. Like I can't even buy like candy bar with that,
So what else, what do you kind of want people to know about Invictus? Like, if they'd have someone in their family or their friends or artists or performers, or they themselves are, and are looking at ways to go about, like I guess, give us the pitch, so to speak.
Yeah. I think for now, again, because we're in this rebrand, and then we'll do kind of a big launch in the next few months. But there's a bunch of information that will be updated on our website, and so it would be great. And there'll be opportunities to really kind of sign up for updates, to directly engage. I also, because we're so small and we're just getting started, I'm literally, talking to artists myself right now. So if anybody wants to have a conversation, I would love to have conversations. I think one of the most powerful things for me so far has been hearing people's stories about kind of how they got into this, why they're doing what they're doing. Again, so many artists are working 2 or 3 jobs, right? But their true heart and soul is in the music. And that's really what we'd like to be able to provide them with, is that opportunity to have this be the way that they can support themselves and their families long term. And then really create a pathway of kind of economic mobility more broadly for that. So I think, kind of staying in tune with our website and what's happening. Certainly, we're at a point where because we're building, and I think once it launches, it's going to be pretty quick. And so would love to talk to anyone that even wants to join us and be part of it, because we're still kind of in that phase, right? Where anybody that kind of wants to help, we'll take that. So yeah, I just think people that are passionate about it and excited, that's really who I want to be part of this right now. Especially just with the state of the world.
What are you envisioning the process or the relationship feeling like? So, rebrand ready, and artist contacts and sort of says okay, this sounds great, let's go. What is that sort of onboarding or next steps, or what could they expect, or what do you see that looking like?
Yeah, right now it's really just, we're kind of building, I would say, and this is in some ways more of a movement even than it is a single business that we're building. So we're really trying to build this alternative model and bring this, this grassroots movement with us. I think right now, I do have an artist in Nashville who's, going to a lot of events and connecting with artists. He is also able to actually publish music now. So even if we aren't at a point yet where we're able to sign people, if any, we have an ability to help people get their music published if they want to start getting it out. We also can do things on social media to help promote people, and we're building that up. I have an intern working with me now who's I'm so excited. He's so good. And he's actually he helps promote events in Florida for artists and runs the whole event. It's actually a club through his school, which is really cool that they do that. But puts on whole events for artists and merch and everything. And so, we can build web pages. There's a lot of things that we can do while we're in this ramp up phase in the absence of an entire contract. Right. And we are drafting contracts. We're looking at all of that. I would say, again, it's probably a few months from the point where we're willing to have somebody be part of it. But again, my guy in Nashville, he's drafting the contract and he's an artist. Right. So the idea is to really have it be, transparent with integrity, super upfront.
So at the very least, sort of scaling so that they can actually kind of engage with, but also still focus on the music. So social and digital presence and, that type of thing. And I guess probably support with merch and, other sort of venue negotiations, or, perform, get them on circuits. Or are you still trying to figure out the touring piece of it and performance side of it?
We're definitely touring is going to have to come down the road a little bit once we get kind of more of the business model in place. But yeah, that'll definitely be a big part of what comes. I think one of the things that I'm seeing the most just from artists is that even there's artists that already have their stuff streaming that are not making an income from it. And so I think educating artists about, again, this is what a master's is. This is your publishing. This is how you can start making money, right? You make sure you copyright your stuff before you put it out anywhere. There's a lot of steps that it seems small, but many of them don't know. And so they're losing money. I literally have someone out who has this stuff on spot. He's not making a dime yet. And other people are, because that's the way the model is set up, is that intermediaries profit, right, from the artist's creation.
Right.
And that, again, it's not, it is what it is. It's very successful for some and not for others. But I think that is the meat of it, is like, especially as an educator, right? I'm just like, well, this is, in this transition, like as we build this, like we can help fill that gap. Like we can really help people understand the tools they need to start being successful. And I see more of this, like even on Instagram, there's some people like offering courses on like, how to retain your master's and all of these things. But I think it can be really overwhelming, especially if, again, what you care about most is the art, not the business side of it. And so the business side is almost like an annoyance.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, well, if you want to make money, you gotta.
Or it's just daunting, right? Like
Totally.
if your instrument of choice is not a keyboard and it's a guitar, like anything digital, can be overwhelming, or so.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, navigating through that, like you said, like there's having a course on it and getting the how-to, and then you open up the application or whatever it is, and it's not so clear, right?
Totally.
There's nervousness there.
Yeah, and again, having taught for a long time, there are super smart people that, again, get overwhelmed and have moments, right? Where so it's not a matter of intelligence, it's not a matter of capability or capacity. Sometimes it's like you just need someone to actually walk you through, depending on the kind of learner you are.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important piece too. Like, yeah, there are people that can like watch a video on TikTok and then build a house. Like, I am not one of them. Like, I would like my house would fall down. So I think, but there are people for whom that works.
Yeah. Sure.
So I think like it's just understanding that and then being able to offer alternative solutions.
I feel like you need some like swag and merch so you can, all the conversations you're having, like as the follow-up, like send it out there and like seed the movement, like get people asking about it.
So we have swag and merch on the website.
Cool.
We even have like koozies.
Didn't know. Sure enough. Go to the website.
Check out the website. Yeah, it's branded. It's cool. And then we also, but yeah, that's like our next thing is I need to do that. But because we're rebranding, I didn't want to buy a whole bunch of merch.
Oh yeah,
and have it be like irrelevant. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it looks pretty good. And then we do have some artists too that wanted to have their merch on our website. So that's the other thing is like we can put your merch up, and then your fans can come and buy it, and then so there's just lots of
very cool
options.
Anything we didn't cover? It sounds really exciting. I mean, it's like, the 8% of artists out there that are in this category need another way, right?
Yes.
So it's
yes. And I think what's confusing is that you look at, phenomenal humans that are in this industry and super successful, and you think, well, why can't I do that? And it's like, well, actually, the system is not designed to help you do that, right? So I think understanding that it's not you, right? It's a system. And that, like, how can we build something else? And really just, I am at a point where it's like, I don't know what I don't know about certain things. It's going to take a village to build this. And I would love to, to have people that want to be a part of it. And again, I love the stories. So I love talking to artists. I love hearing about their stories. And there's just, what's overwhelming to me is there's so many talented people out there that we don't know about.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
There's just, never ending.
I always think it's like, how do we only listen to 13 songs as a society, right? Or even then it's like, go to Spotify and it's like, okay, now there's 20 songs. Like there's an endless sea of, and you go to Nashville and you can walk into any establishment and hear great artists.
Yeah. The other thing that I just wanted to
say, Northampton, Mass.
In case you didn't know, Northampton, Mass. Yeah. The one thing that I thought was interesting that I heard, I think it's Alex Warren, the guy who wrote Ordinary, that like blew up, right?
Yeah.
He was doing an interview and he was talking about how when he first wrote that song, his label hated it. Like everyone told him it was a complete flop and that nobody would care about it. And he was like, this is my song. Like, I'm just going to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And he posted like 500 or something crazy amount of times, like on TikTok to get it to finally, and that was like the 500th time that it went up. Yeah. And so I think like, to me, that was super inspiring, right? Especially as someone who's like, okay, I believe in what I'm building and maybe nobody else does yet, right? But I do, and I know it's this thing and I know it's gonna go, but it's like, it might take 500 times, hopefully not. Yeah, right. But I think that was really powerful because like, look at what happened with that song, right? And his label, from what he said, didn't think it was going to go anywhere, And so just that power of like belief in something, and in yourself, but also in this thing, right, that you're building. Yeah. And so I think that was just a really powerful kind of message that I keep kind of reflecting on periodically to help.
It seems like you're like the ideal. It's the model is the ideal partner to the people that have chosen to stay independent, or not like because for those reasons, but they still need help. So it's like, when it's a better relationship and it's more transparent out of the gate, then there is still power in organization and numbers. So maybe this does become that alternate path for
Yeah.
them.
And the thing that's interesting is, again, like, my background, nonprofit, higher ed, like totally unrelated to this industry. But my experience has always been that if you can include people in the process and what you're building, they're more likely to buy into it ultimately. And you're going to have, and so actually with equity actually comes greater success and power, but it's counterintuitive because you think, and especially if you look at, different government structures over time, like that, there's often that top down, right? Or that like one entity has all the power, but actually, from an economic development standpoint, from all the reasons, like that balance of power actually is a better value proposition for everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece that we have to wrap our brains around differently, I think, for something like this to really take off.
And I thought there was going to be a bigger opportunity for that to happen when it seemed like the industry was sort of unsure how to handle streaming. Like there was this like ended up being much shorter, right? But it was like there was this period where it was just like we can't make money anymore and we can't figure out the streaming piece. And it seemed like that was an opportunity for artists. And the fact that there wasn't anyone there to kind of still unify sort of the independent voice, enabled the labels and the conglomerates to kind of catch up. So I mean, we still need someone to support the broader group and love the mission.
Thank you.
Becky Lewis, founder of Invictus Records, thank you for
Awesome.
joining
Thank you for having me.
8760.